Roll call of attendance.
Done.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Before we do the consent agenda, I want to take a moment and thank you for waiting for us this evening. We are switching to electronic board book. We all have Chromebooks in front of us now. Our technology staff, Patrick in particular, has been extremely helpful in getting us switched over, but we are still working out bugs, and we had to have a little extra time to get us all logged in. But we are saving trees and moving up in 21st, 22nd century, wherever we want to go. So thank you for your patience. Approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would just like to acknowledge, let me pull up, approval of resignations. I just want to express an interest that the board be involved in the selection process for replacing of Mark Hamry after he retires.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda? Before I do that, I'm sorry, I'd like to thank Matamidi PTO especially, and the cash donations to our engineering program. All donations are greatly appreciated, and we have quite a few tonight on the agenda. We have others that are not on the agenda that come through other groups, and we also don't acknowledge in here the time that our community invests in our schools, and we really appreciate that as well. So all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Presentations and recognitions. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is always a highlight of the evening in which we get to recognize some of the outstanding staff and students that we have here. So board members, would you please come to the front of the tables here? The Matamidi girls soccer program has a long and storied tradition. This was, in fact, their 7th state soccer championship. They won that this fall. The girls had a remarkable season, finishing 17-3-2. And in the state championship game, they handed Orono their only loss of the season. The team was seeded 3rd going into the playoffs and just performed admirably and remarkably throughout. So at this time, I'd like to recognize the players that are here and the coach as well. So when I call your name, would you please come to the podium here? Megan Clements. Stephanie Comfort. Megan Lisway. Sonia Meyer. Outstanding players is one thing, but it's also helpful to have an outstanding coach, and Mr. Wald has been not only an outstanding math teacher, but also an outstanding soccer coach, and so, Mr. Wald, come forward, and congratulations on another remarkable year.
Thank you, Dr. Larson. It's a pleasure to be here to recognize 3 of our students. These 3 students were selected to a state honors choir for grades 7 and 8 for the Minnesota State Honors Choir from the American Choral Directors Association. We have one 7th grade student, Alexa Atkinson. She couldn't be here because she's at the choir concert, her own choir concert right now. And then we have 2 8th grade students here, Alicia Cypress and Kimberly Hoffman. And these students were selected to participate. They participated on November 18th at St. Andrews, and there was 150 girls in the choir, and there were over 500 people who had auditioned for those 150 spots. So we are very proud of them and want to recognize their achievements. I'm doing the Lions Club. Every year, the Lions Club puts together a peace poster, and this year, one of our students was awarded that, and we would like to recognize Sonali Moore for winning the Wildwood Lions Club Peace Poster Contest. So, I don't think she's here though. So.
Right in front of it, I'm like. Oh, no, we have to re-sign in.
No. Yes. Just the password for that, I think. I don't know if we really need to or not, but. Okay. All right. Next, we have a community education update. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, it's a pleasure to have Dr. Weiland here share with us what's going on in community ed. So we'll call you to the podium, please, Dr. Weiland.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Larson. I'm Kathy Weiland, the Director of Community Ed, and I'm delighted to be here to give an update about our Community Ed program. I'm going to cover these areas: the annual report, the audit, philosophy shift, some facilities improvement in the news, and a shameless plug for our community book read. Our annual report is submitted every November to the Minnesota Department of Education. This past school year, we served over 9,500 residents. That's about 2,000 more than last year. We worked with 42 groups using facilities, and the facility use is a service that we provide to the district of reserving facilities for outside groups and facilitating that effort. And we figure it brings in over 18,000 people to the district. There are separate reports that are submitted every year to the Minnesota Department of Education for early childhood programs. So there's additional numbers of children we serve. Our audit was very positive. It's Fund 4. If you take all the district funds together, community ed is just 3.9% of the total district budget. This year we put $187,000 into the fund balance and ended the year with a positive fund balance of over $500,000. We also support the general fund, as do many community ed programs, through chargebacks and services. In our district, it's about 18% of the budget, which is pretty high. Most districts it's single digits, but as you can see right now, we can afford such a contribution. We adjusted our philosophy in serving adults and shifted some staffing in the past. It was thought that adults could go to Stillwater, North St. Paul, and White Bear to get programming, and we decided that we wanted them to come here, especially to this lovely building. And so we increased our programming and added summer day trips. Went to the state capitol this year, and which was perfect timing, by the way. Actually, it was very popular, so we had to go twice. It was really hard, but anyway, so we've increased our day trips, and then monthly breakfast club is very popular. Our community lunches, right when I got here, we were averaging 20 people. I think we had to cancel one, and now we're up to 46 on average. For our December luncheon, Mark was here and so was Kevin. There were over 80 people and over 40 singers, and it was really hot. But it was a great crowd, so Santa came, and so our average, though, is about 46, and our low is 36, and I think that's usually the October lunch, and I think it's because they don't like the cabbage, but I'm not sure about that. For facility improvements, we work a lot with athletic associations, the Lions, the Legion, Our own Buildings and Grounds Department and the City of Matamita is a wonderful partner as well. And these are some of the projects that we've done recently. Improving the playgrounds here at the DEC. We added lockers at Wildwood and a T-swing. The deck rink additions right next door. We put in a new gate, some rink rules, some new fencing just went in, I think, this week. We got a little more work to do on the fencing. We added some scoreboards at the middle school, replaced some sheds and improved sheds here on this property. And I know you heard last year about us updating the gym at O.H. Anderson. In the news, we are in the news pretty regularly in the White Bear Press. I think we had 4 photos this week. I don't know how that happened, but I'm very thankful. The White Bear Lake Magazine featured one of our instructors who teaches at the middle school and O.H. Anderson. And last February, our Sweetheart Dance was in there. And then the cable company came out last, I think it was January or February, and did a feature on our pickleball players, and that was released this fall. This is a community book read that we'll be hosting. This book, A Good Time for the Truth, was a school board book read, an administrator book read, and many of our teachers have read it as well. So we'll have 3 of the writers for this book, plus the editor, here to talk to us about their process and have a panel discussion. Kevin has agreed to be our moderator for the evening, so we hope you'll be able to join us for that. And I'll entertain questions if you have any.
Mike, go ahead.
Is that book read, is that a free thing?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Have questions for them?
Comment more than question. I would say that there's so much more of a vibrancy and an excitement of programming through community ed, more now than I've ever seen in the 12 years I've been on the board. I've been connected to this district. So that community lunch, it really is a wonderful lunch. The food comes from Roma outside the cabbage. It's really outstanding.
Which is good, too.
Yeah, and, it's $7. I mean, you can't even get a meal at McDonald's for that. So it's just, and people are fantastic. I mean, we do. I mean, I sit at the tables and there's people from White Bear. We heard this is a really good thing. We're here. I think some folks from White Bear wanted to hear the harmonica player at one of these things. So it really is growing, and it's a wonderful, wonderful way to network with people in our communities that you might not normally see. So, board members, Mark and I are pretty much regulars, but I would encourage if you're around to do that. And just it's just strong. I mean, the things that are happening, and I actually vie to see if I can out photo Kathy, but I'm not at all there. She trumps me every week.
Yes.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. I've got a great staff, so
Yes, you do.
Thank you for all your great programming. You're very creative.
thank you.
Very timely also. They're up to date. important
Hopefully.
things in our community, so.
Well, if we don't, people don't come, so we're all about that. If you come, then if you don't come, they vote by their enrollment, so,
I
yeah.
appreciate the shift in philosophy.
Thank you.
It shows.
Good.
All right. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks.
Report from student representative. Emma.
Good evening. December is always a very busy month for the high school as Christmas break is coming up. We get out of school, or we don't have school from the 22nd up until we come back on the 3rd. So a few things that have happened. Last week, Matamita's SLC had their semi-annual Parents' Night Out at the high school, and we had over 100 kids ranging from infants to 5th graders, and we babysat them for the night so parents can go out and have a relaxing night at home where they can go out, and do whatever. And then we raise money to go bring holiday presents to a elementary school in St. Paul called Jackson Elementary School. It's a Hmong immersion school, and over 50% of the kids it's a low-income school, and many of the kids don't get any presents for the holidays, so we buy presents at Target, and then we go and give them to the kindergartners. And so we got to go yesterday and during 5th and 6th hour, sorry, Mr. Wald, that I missed class, but we got to give presents to kids and then play with them, and it's always heartwarming because they don't really realize that they are going to get to keep the presents. Like my little girl that I was playing with tried to give the presents back to me, but they get to keep them and bring them home and share them with their siblings, and that's always an awesome event that SLC does. Also this week there was a lot of concerts happening. There was a high school band concert this week, and as well as the middle school concerts. The 6th and 8th grade I think were on Tuesday, and then tonight is the 7th grade. Next Monday is the high school choir concert at 7:30 in the Chautauqua, and it's our winter choir concert. It'll be really fun if you'd like to go. And also the choir is going tomorrow to St. at the Mall of America for the Clouds concert to honor Zach Zobiak. So that'll be fun. It's a fun bonding experience. And overall, things are getting really busy. There's going to be a lot of tests next week, and winter sports are getting into swing. So thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Approval of minutes for November 9th, regular meeting. Motion?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and information items, 9A, calendar. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emma mentioned some of the events I was going to speak to. Also, we're coming back on January 3rd, but on the January 4th is our first school board meeting. We're having an enrollment committee meeting right before that at 5:30 p.m., and then our school board meeting is at 7 p.m. We usually have our school board meetings the 2nd and 4th, but we have it at the first Thursday in January because two reasons. One is that MSBA conference is that second Thursday, which many of us are attending, and the other thing is that we have to seat any of the new board members that happen at that time, so we always have it then. I mentioned the MSBA Leadership Conference. That's going to be on Thursday, January 11th and 12th. We also have other things happening in terms of school board. Finance Committee meeting on January 25th, and the school board study session also on that same 25th date. And then Dr. Weiland mentioned the Good Time for the Truth. If you haven't read it, it really is worth reading. There are 14, I believe, short essays by different authors that all have a unique perspective on their experiences in Minnesota on race. It'll be a community book read. The board had a very robust discussion when we talked about it before, and our administrative staff read it 2 summers ago as part of our equity work. Those are some of the events coming up. Anybody else want to draw attention to anything?
9B, second reading of policies. Dr. Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. We have the policies here before us. Of the policies that were mentioned, 509, enrollment of non-resident students, there were no changes from the first reading to the second reading for that. On policy 614, school district testing plan and procedure, from the policy committee, there was a suggestion that we add the procedures. That was added, and there are no suggestions on that. And then the new policies, or two of the other policies that we have here, 620, credit for learning. And that one the board had some questions on and asked me to do a little bit of research on, so I'd like to speak to that right now. Or should I go through the other policies first? Because the other ones were fine.
Let's go in order because we're scrolling on our screens.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Credit for learning is policy 620. There were 2 questions that came up during this policy, one of the questions was about weighted grades. The board asked me to check in to see what we do for our weighted grades and what the other area schools do. The second question was about college credit and getting high school credit. These are for post-secondary enrollment classes, PSEO. So when students leave the high school to take a class at a college. Our top 3 colleges that students go to is Century, Bethel, University of Minnesota, and Northwestern. But more of our students actually go to, the first one is Century, and then the second most popular one is Bethel and Northwestern due to the proximity. The U of M is 4th. So the first piece, weighted grades. And the policy, we are recommending that the only grades that are weighted are those that are in the advanced placement classes or the college and the school classes, and that we not weight PSEO classes. I asked the guidance department to check in on this, and some of the school districts that they referred to me weight their PSEO, they do not weight their PSEO grades. None of the ones that they shared with me, which included Mankato, Stillwater, White Bear Lake, and North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale. None of those districts weight their grades. They did not share with me any schools that weighted their PSEO classes. All of those schools, except for Mankato, have College in the Schools class. Mankato only only weights their advanced placement classes. Stillwater, White Bear Lake, North St. Paul, Maple Oakdale also weight their advanced placement and their College in the Schools, but none of them weight their PSEO classes. The second request that the board made was about what happens if a student takes a three-credit college class, because that does not translate to a full credit at the high school. And I asked the guidance department for their procedures and what they do about that. And what they do is they meet with each of the students to talk about the post-secondary enrollment options and how the credits transfer back to our school. The colleges in question award credits are usually 3, 4, or 5, and the guidance counselors make sure that they're able to graduate by meeting with each student and reviewing the course they're talking and the credits they've earned so far. The practices and protocols in place at the high school are such that the students who take post-secondary enrollment options classes, they work with their counselor to ensure that they pass the post-secondary enrollment classes and they'll have enough credits to graduate. We do not have anything in policy about that, but our procedures are such that I think it's fine. The question that the board asked about weighted grades, I only got information back from the guidance department about 5 different schools.
Based on what Dr. Larson's found out, any additional information requested on that policy or additional discussion on those 2 areas? Is the board interested in weighting PSEO? I think that's why it was posed.
I think I brought it up, and I was just more curious what was happening other places. The 5 schools seem random.
Well, there are 3 area school, 3
Yeah.
neighbors.
Yeah. I've never heard us compare to Mankato before, so I was kind of
Right.
surprised.
On their listserv, that's one of the schools that replied.
Oh,
Oh, you
okay.
put it on
Oh,
the
they
listserv.
just
They-
sent it.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
That helps, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on PSEO? Weighted grades? I had asked the question about the college credits, and the question I had asked was, for a regular full-time class, is it 3, 4, or 5 credits at each of those institutions?
Right.
Right, but you told me they offer 3, 4, and 5. Yes, they offer courses across those credits, but when they take their standard English class, are they a 3-credit campus or a 4-credit system, is the question that was asked.
The question that was answered may not have been that one, then I'm sorry for that. But from the information that I got, and maybe I misworded the question, is that Century, University of Minnesota, Bethel, and Northwestern, they award credits that are usually 3, 4, or 5. I mean,
Right.
it depends on what the student signs up for and
But
selects.
there's a standard class hour, and it's usually 3 or 4. So St. Thomas is 4. All of our undergraduate courses, most of them run at 4, and that builds your full-time load and determines, so when you think about the core English, the things our students would be taking, what does the core run as, what the question was. Are they running mainly 3s, or are they running a 4-credit? Because if our main partners are running 3, then a lot of students are having an issue with those credits coming back in. If they're running 4, then we're fine. So that was the question that was asked. Can we continue to figure that out, please?
I'll try to re-ask it in
Okay.
a different way.
I mean, you can just open the catalog and see what it is. Anything else on policy? Okay. If you want to call.
Then policy 721, there were no changes in that one from the first reading to the second reading. Policy 805, waste reduction and recycling, there were no changes in that policy from the first reading to the second reading. Policy 903, there were no policy changes. The question that came up was about, excuse me here. The question that came up was about students who are taking post-secondary enrollment options. The students who's enrolled in these classes, they will remain at the high school during the regular school day in accordance with established procedures, and they will have reasonable access during regular school hours. Those are the additions that were changed. We did not go into any other kind of details on homeschooling or other options. We feel that this covers it, what we need to have.
Any other information requested for the policies? This is a second reading, so at the next board meeting, there would be a vote to accept the changes or decline the changes. Do we need more information? All right, then. Dr. Larson, anything else on that?
No.
Action items, truth and taxation presentation. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, it's in accordance with Minnesota Statute 275-065, the school board has to certify their final payable 2018 property tax levy to the home county auditor no later than December 28th, 2017. So we have Bill Manazzi, business manager here to share with the board the information of the 2017-18 budget and the school district portion of taxes payable. At the end of this presentation, you'll be asking for approval to submit this then to the county auditor. Thank you. Bill?
Good evening. As Dr. Larson mentioned, thank you for the opportunity to present the 2017 payable 2018 property tax hearing. As required, we do this every December. And I'll just start out by saying this is somewhat confusing. So I start out each meeting when we talk about this by talking that we're really talking in 3 years here. So in this specific year, it's the 2017 payable 2018 property tax hearing. Our school district fiscal year runs from July to June, and obviously the calendar year runs from January through December. So we are talking about 3 different years here. We're talking about data collected in the school district's fiscal year 2017, property taxes that are payable for our district residents in calendar 2018, so after January 1st, and then that's district revenue in fiscal year 2018-19, so starting after July 1st of 2018. So we're really spanning 3 years, which is cumbersome at best. So I like to start out by saying that each time. So I'll try to scroll through here. Feel free to remind me if I forget to keep up with the mouse. Requirements of the Truth in Taxation hearing as governed by Minnesota Statute 275.065. First, we will look at the 2017 Pay 18 proposed property tax levy, the proposed change from the prior year, and then specific reasons for that proposed change. The second part, we will look at the current year budget, distribution of revenues by source, and spending by program area. And then we will have a time as required by statute for public comment and questions. I also give the disclaimer every year that I do try to make financial presentations as interesting as financial presentations can be. This is governed and prescribed by the statute. I am required to say certain things in a certain order. So this by nature is fairly dry. So if I am reading more than I normally do, that's the reason why, and we'll do the best that we can here. Looking first at the 17 Pay 18 levy information. This is information that was approved by the school board in September from a prelim levy standpoint. And then we will be asking to certify the final levy tonight and then submitting, as Dr. Larson mentioned, submitting the information to the Minnesota Department of Education and Washington County by the end of December. Looking at the Matamidi High School's gross levy comparison for all funds, you can see that in total, our total percentage increase for all funds combined is less than 1%. It's 0.64% increase from the prior year, which really shows a focus of administration, staff, and the school board on keeping taxes as consistent as possible year over year. And we will look at each fund in the next several pages, but you can see the overall changes in the general fund, community education fund, as Dr. Llewellyn mentioned, the debt service fund, and then the OPEB debt service fund. Add it all together, the total dollar increase year over year, $87,110, which is 0.64%. And I'll just touch on before I move on here, because this is meant to be a general overview. This is going to be a review for a lot of people. The general fund, obviously our largest fund in the district, day-to-day operations of the district. Community education fund, as Dr. Weiland mentioned, early learning through adult enrichment courses, and sort of a lot in between there, obviously. The debt service fund is really our principal and interest payments on the voter-approved debt service bonds. So we are making bonds on Wildwood Elementary, which was built within the last several years. That was voter-approved debt, and we are making payments, principal and interest payments on that. That would come out of the debt service fund. And then finally, the OPEB debt service fund, OPEB standing for other post-employment benefits. That's also voter-approved debt that we would make principal and interest payments out of that OPEB service fund. And we'll look at each fund a little bit closer in the next several slides. Starting first with the general fund, obviously the day-to-day operations of the district, there's going to be the majority of our movement here. You can see that in total, the general fund increased by 3.54%, and you can see the different categorical areas there. I won't review all of the components because some are fairly small, but I'll highlight some of the larger variances year over year. So referendum levies, the top line, that's the voter-approved referendum levy, which for us is $1,043.74 per adjusted pupil unit. And you can see that overall is a very small change there of $8,400. Moving down to the capital projects referendum, 4 down from the top, you can see that increase, our capital projects referendum is a voter-approved referendum that is really the tools for teachers in their classroom. So that's really our technology and related equipment that our talented staff use in their classroom. That is tied to the increases or decreases in our net tax capacity of our taxing district. So the NTC went up 3%, which is why you see the 3% increase in the capital projects referendum. Moving down to student achievement, you can see that went from 32,000 down to 0. That number was phased out during the 2015 legislative session, and the hold harmless amount was rolled into the referendum levy. So basically just consolidating 2 line items into one for student achievement. Let's go down all the way to the bottom here. The largest mover, $224,000 of the total $284,000 increase is attributed to LTFM revenue. So LTFM stands for Long-Term Facilities Maintenance. That is the new, I keep calling it new, somewhat new plan that the 2015 legislature enacted to replace what was health and safety and deferred maintenance. So that's really our longer-term maintenance projects on some of our building and infrastructure, and that's on a 3-year statutory increase. So the reason for the increase this year is when the legislature approved that in 2015, they approved a 3-year increase. We're going from year 2 at $292 per pupil unit to year 3 at $380 per pupil unit, and you can see the resulting increase. So that amount will level off now at $380 per pupil unit going forward. So certainly a useful source of revenue for our building maintenance projects. Looking next at the Community Education Fund, and not to pick on community ed, but Dr. Weiland did a nice job tonight, and we'll go quickly through this just because the change is so very minor. It's a total decrease of $2,200. As I mentioned, community education programs for all learners from early childhood through adult and senior programming. Programming to include, but certainly not limited to, community education, early childhood programs, school readiness, and adult basic education programming, and a very small decline of 0.81% year over year. Our debt service fund, and again, as I mentioned, the principal and interest payments on voter-approved bonds. We are required as a district, as all school districts in the state of Minnesota are, to levy 105% of the expected principal and interest payments on our voter-approved debt service payments for any given year. The 105% is to account for delinquent payments. So the state wants to make sure that you're able to make your debt service payments, and they're accounting for some delinquencies there, so that's why we're required to levy 105% of our expected payments. In any given year, if your debt service fund balance gets to a point where it's too high, they'll do an excess fund balance adjustment to basically bring that 105% down. So any variations here really have to do with that excess fund balance adjustment and or changes in debt service payments year over year. So you see a slight decrease there of 3.84%. That's partly attributed to that fund balance adjustment and then partly attributed to just different principal and interest payments on the debt service schedules in 2018-19 versus 2017-18 is really the reason for the decrease there. And then finally, the OPEB debt service. Again, I mentioned OPEB, other post-employment benefits, principal and interest on the voter-approved OPEB bond from 2009, or which was approved in 2009. This goes through levy year 2022, so believe it or not, we're coming up to the end of this debt service cycle, and a very small increase here of $7,700, again, just accounting for the different payments year over year on the principal and interest. The next few slides I'll roll through fairly quickly because they're just by way of review, just a visual representation of the levies in total. 2016-17 compared to 17-18. Let's see, 16-17 in yellow, 17-18 in blue, both Matamidi colors. That's on purpose. Total increase of $87,000. You can see a slight increase in the general fund, which is by far the largest amount. Community education, relatively flat. Debt service, a slight decrease. And then the OPEB debt service fund, just a very slight decrease as well. The second part of the presentation tonight will be on the current school year district budget. This information is from the 2017-18 preliminary budget. So the school board is required to approve the budget for the next school year prior to the start of the year. So as I mentioned, we're on a July to June fiscal year. The budget, this budget that you're going to see tonight was approved by the school board in June of 2017. And I just want to make that point because after this, we're going to be looking at the 17-18 revised budget. And so if you're wondering why the numbers don't tie out, we're required to use the preliminary budget figure for this presentation. So quite a bit of information on here, and I'll just review it as a whole. The general fund, as Dr. Weiland touched on, is the largest portion. So you can see that the general fund in terms of revenue and expenditures is about 80%. So that 38 million as a percentage of 47 million, about 80% of our total operating funds in total. So, and then in terms of the general fund, looking at the state aid portion here, this 28.218 million. That's driven largely by student count. The amount is set by the legislature every other year in a funding year. That amount is the largest amount that we get. So about 75 cents on every dollar that we receive in revenue comes from the state. So certainly the other funding categories, namely our levy, miscellaneous local revenue, and then our federal aid in terms of title funds is certainly important to our operations. But you know, when 75% of your revenue comes from the state, very important to work with our legislators and continue to see increases in the state aid funding formula. Looking at the expenditure portion down here, school districts are people-intensive organizations, and you can see that 80% of our expenditure budget is in the form of salary and benefits, as you would expect. We're a people-intensive organization. So, and then the hard truth, as we've talked about in some of our budget discussions, is the remaining 20% is somewhat fixed. You have to keep the lights on, you have to pay for water, garbage, HVAC. There's some stuff that we can, items that we look at here, but things like supplies, building equipment, and then the miscellaneous, a lot of that is property and workers' compensation insurance. A lot of that is fairly fixed. So important to note that about 80% of our general fund expenditure budget is spent on personnel. So you can see in the preliminary budget the difference between the 38.3 million and the 38.6, a slight deficit of 323,000 in the general fund. Food service fund is showing a slight deficit of 55,000. The community education fund has a surplus, a slight surplus here. The debt service fund, as we mentioned, is relatively flat with about a $30,000 surplus, and then the OPEB debt service fund, a slight surplus as well. So you can see that's the preliminary budget from 17 pay 18. Again, a visual representation of the revenues by fund. So we touched on the general fund is about 80%. It's actually 81.33% of our revenue, all funds combined, and you can see the other funds where they fall into place. Looking at the next slide should look very similar as a visual representation of the expenditures by fund. We would hope that revenue in the general fund is the largest piece of the pie. You would hope that expenditures in the general fund are the largest piece of the pie, and that certainly is the case. We're within 1% here of the revenues by fund. So looking at the expenditures more specifically in the general fund, expenditures by program dimension. And this is a really telling slide for me, and I'll try to fit it all on one page, or I'll go back and forth a little bit. Because the general fund is such a largest piece of the pie, it's helpful to look at the program areas of the general fund in more detail. I've worked in several districts, and I just want to make a note that of the districts that I've worked in, the Mahtomedi School District does an excellent job of focusing expenditures in the classroom. One thing that stuck out to me here is looking at the elementary and secondary regular instruction. So $19,680,000 of our general fund expenditure budget is in elementary and secondary regular instruction. Another $7.121 million is in special education instruction. If you add those two numbers together and take them as a percentage of the general fund in total, 70 cents, over 70 cents on every dollar is spent on elementary and secondary regular instruction and or special education instruction. And that's a really telling statistic or percentage there. And you can see that our other areas, administration and support services, some of these are fairly self-explanatory. I'll go over the ones that aren't. That's really our school board, district and building administration, and then business and technology, as well as some other expenditures flow through that administration and support services. Vocational education instruction, things like our FACS program that we have. Instructional support services, those are things like curriculum, media, staff development flows through that program area. Pupil support services, things like counseling, health, our transportation contract flows through this pupil support services. Sites and buildings, that's really our custodial operations and maintenance, and that's a lot of our capital expenditures flow through the sites and buildings. And then fiscal and other, that's a lot of our property and workers' comp expenses. So you can see where our general fund breakout is there in expenditures. And again, if you weren't getting sick of pie charts, you will after this one. Another visual representation of the general fund program expenditures. And just want to highlight again, 50.9% of the general fund spent on elementary and secondary instruction, and then another 18.42 on special education. So that's how I got that 70%. Going to the last area here before we wrap it up. It's helpful to look at the main variables that may cause property tax increases and or decreases. So I've highlighted four main areas that we traditionally see here. The first one, change in market value. So change in a taxable market value from either an assessed value or changes made to a home. So if you put a deck on your home, if you put an addition on your home, that may change your value and may change your property tax amount. Changes in class rates or history, change in valuation of other taxable properties. So change in valuation rates of commercial property, seasonal, agricultural, that may change your property taxes. Voter approved referendums, so certainly not just school districts, but school districts, cities, counties, voter approved referendums can change your property taxes. And then other state adjustments by the legislature in either a funding or a bonding year can change your taxes as well. Second to last slide here, referendum market value. So that's the market value of all the taxable property in our taxing district. So in portions or all of the 9 communities that make up the Mahtomedi School District, excluding agricultural or seasonal property. So you can see that we are up to, as of 2017, our referendum market value is $2,196,000,000, which is an awfully big number, and an increase of 5.8% from the prior year, and an average increase over the last 15 years of 3.33%. The exciting news as it relates to our property tax base and our property owners is $2.196 billion is the new high water mark from 2008. Our previous high water mark of $2,177,000,000. So obviously we had several consecutive years of negative referendum market value adjustments during the recession, and we have rebounded to a new high water mark of $2.196 billion. So certainly good news in terms of referendum market value. Last slide. This is typically what people are most interested in. So I talked about the 0.6% change in school district levy revenue year over year. People typically want to know, what does that mean in terms of property taxes for me? So if we took in our taxing district a residential homestead with a 2016 estimated market value of $250,000, and I'm just picking that number, in 2017, their actual school portion of property taxes would be $1,437. That value increased by 6%, or I think 5.8% was the exact amount, from 250 up to 265,000, and your property taxes would increase from 1,436 up to 1,448, an increase of $11.79 year over year, a 0.82% increase. So certainly across the board, small increases in property taxes year over year attributed to the school district. Getting down to the nuts and bolts of it here, I just have to read this off, being as we are seeking action on the 2017 pay 2018 levy. Pursuant to Minnesota statute, the school board, Independent School District 832, Matamidi, Minnesota, authorized to make the following proposed tax levies for general purposes. The general fund, $8,335,609.97. The community services fund, $273,845.21. The debt service fund, $4,694,823.17. The OPEB debt service fund, $320,806.48. So a total proposed tax levy for 2017 pay 18 of $13,625,084.83. That's it.
Questions, comments from board members?
I move approval.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Was it paragraph number 8?
The approval of preliminary budget, and then the presentation is to provide the board and community the current year financial position of the
Right.
district, so
So-
we'll want to do that. But did we take a vote on the first one?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so-
Yeah.
So we're on to approval of the 2017-18 revised budget? Okay. The board will also be asking for approval upon completion of this, so back to you.
Thank you. Looking at the 2017-18 revised budget, so we just got through looking at the Truth in Taxation presentation where we looked at some preliminary budget amounts. And as I mentioned, we were going to be looking at the 17-18 revised budget tonight. The preliminary budget was approved by the school board in June of 2017. As typical to prior years or similar to prior years, we're about halfway through the fiscal year, and we are looking at some revised budget figures for the current year. This is the same document. The school board had a chance to review this document at the work session on December 7th. It should be noted this is the same document with no changes to it since the last board meeting when we reviewed the information. So I will review it again just at a high level because there are no changes to this document from the previous meeting. So you can see that in the general fund, we have an unassigned fund balance. We had an unassigned fund balance as of June 30, 2017, at $3.13 million. That's 8.2% fund balance as of the start of this year. You can see that underneath that we have some restricted funding categories. For, in particular, we're looking at restricted capital projects levy, as I mentioned in the previous action item, really the tools for our teachers in their classrooms. Restricted health and safety, as mentioned previously, the health and safety and deferred maintenance was rolled into the new long-term facilities maintenance program. That's why you see some residual fund balance and also some prior year adjustments in terms of revenue but no expenditures budgeted there because they are down 2 lines below under LTFM. Operating capital, you can see that we started the year with a fund balance of $163,000. We are budgeted to have a slight deficit in operating capital. And then also in long-term facilities maintenance, we started the year with a slight deficit of $26,000 and budgeted to decrease down to $47,000 at the end of this year. The nice thing about LTFM is that is expected and budgeted for. We're able to sort of look at our big ticket items, look at a 10-year deferred maintenance budget, and in some years we plan to spend that fund balance down, and other years we'll build that fund balance back up. That allows us to really do those big ticket items that we need to do at the time that we need to do them. So that amount is budgeted and expected for by our facilities department. Under the assigned balance, you can see that we have 4 assignments. We have $547,000 at the beginning of the year in an assignment to a subsequent year's budget. We have an assigned balance for building donations, which is things like MAIF, who's so generous with the school district, and also other building donations. We have an assigned balance for student activity accounts. So our activity accounts, really the fundraising accounts for the different activities and athletic programs. And then we have an assigned amount for severance as well. So in total, assignment to start the year, $1.465 million. Looking at the revised, the largest area here, looking at the unassigned general fund revised revenues, we are revising our general fund revenues to $35.717 million. The main reason for the decrease in revenue is that's student count driven. So the original budget was built on 3,275 ADMs, students, and we are revising that figure downward to 3,240 to reflect more accurate student count figures as we've gotten into the year, and the resulting decrease in revenue is largely attributed to the decrease in students. Also looking at the revised expenditures, we're revising our expenditures to $37.05 million. And I should mention that I do have a note at the bottom of the page. The Matamidi Education Association, our teachers union, their contract expired June of 2017. As in similar prior years, we're in negotiations with the teachers group now. We have included an amount in here for teacher negotiations, and certainly that expenditure amount would be subject to change depending on what the actual settlement is. So we will continue to monitor that as negotiations continue. In the assigned fund balance under the subsequent year budget, I have a outgoing transfer of $500,000 here and an incoming transfer of $500,000 here. So in the preliminary budget, the school board assigned $500,000 of the total $547 from assigned to unassigned to help bridge the deficit in the current year. We are keeping that amount in the unassigned in the revised budget, which helps decrease the deficit that we're projecting. So overall, our projected fund balance as of June 30, 2018 is estimated to be just under $2.3 million, which would put our unassigned fund balance at an estimated 5.79%. So as we have discussed previously, that 5.79% is below the fund balance policy. And so administration, staff, and the school board is aware that fund balance is projected to fall below that. In just reflecting and having previous meetings, I think we have a solid plan and a timeline to address this shortfall for the 2018-19 budget, because certainly the structural imbalance is not just going to go away, and we need to, I think we have a good timeline starting with the January 4th meeting to really begin those conversations on the 18-19 budget now that we have a solid handle and a revised budget in the current year.
Do I have a motion to approve the revised budget?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I add one thing? Now that the budget, the fund balance is projected to be less than 8%, I'll be communicating with administration tomorrow put into effect our policy 714.
And can you describe what will happen around that policy?
Yeah. There's three main things that happen. One is no new programs without at least the revenue that comes in, and no new expenses that we have. And we'll also be looking for ways to reduce expenses or increase revenue throughout the rest of the year.
Okay. Thank you. School start times. Action item, Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, this has been an issue that's been before the school board on numerous occasions. We've talked about it often here, and also we've talked about it in listening sessions. We've gotten emails from community members, and we've heard a lot of issues that people have raised about it. There are a couple of things that I do want to point out. A lot of it has to do with student wellness and the importance of that. And sleep is one factor. It's the one factor that schools can control. We can't go into people's homes and take away devices or make sure that students get to bed at a reasonable time. There are some parenting things that were brought up in the listening sessions that we need to be aware of and that we can incorporate, as well as we can encourage families to do that. But one of the things that we really need to work on is student wellness, and ideally, everyone would get the amount of sleep that they need. That includes adults as well as students. And I think those are some of the things that we have to do. There's research that is pretty compelling that the research is showing that lack of sleep can have very negative impacts on student wellness, specifically for teenagers. Kyla Wallstrom of the University of Minnesota, in a publication entitled The Conversation, KSDK, cites research that states the secretions of sleep hormone melatonin begins at about 10:45 p.m. and continues till about 8 a.m. Well, this means that teenagers are unable to fall asleep until melatonin secretion begins, and they're also not able to awaken until the melatonin secretion stops. There's less research on sleep in elementary students, and that's an area of research that needs to be explored before we can take an action that will affect about half the students. Therefore, the recommendation that I am putting before the board is that the school board table this issue until the 2019-20 school year, and when the consideration of school start times would be examined at that time. And then in the interim period, that we would do these 7 things. 1, we would severely limit middle school and high school activities before 8 a.m. Any before-school activity would require the approval of the building principal. I do have a comment on that from one of the teachers that I'd like to share in a moment. Whenever possible, avoid AP or college in the schools classes first hour. All electronic homework submissions would be due at 10 p.m. at the latest. In the event of late games or practices, accommodations with the student and teacher can be arranged. So there's an exception that we can have there. Official school practice activities, athletic or artistic, end by 9 p.m. I've also had conversation with one of the principals I wish to speak to on that. Although sleep education is already covered in health classes, both the middle school and high school, and it's part of the stress and wellness unit, we're going to need to continue to make sure that students and families are educated about the importance of sleep. We will, and we have in some instances, assessed students for sleep deprivation when dealing with behavioral issues. We will, though, need to provide training for those counselors, PBIS specialists, et cetera, that they have not had it and wherever that's necessary. And we'll try to have no final exams at 8 a.m. at the high school. I do want to go back to 2 of the things that staff members mentioned. The first one is about limiting middle school and high school student activities before 8 a.m. Linda Najelic, she is the jazz band teacher. She's communicated with Dr. Newbeck and then also with me about this, and she has made a couple of points that I want to bring forward. The reason this band program and many others in the state meet with their jazz bands before school is to allow students to be involved in many activities. In the past, I've tried to meet with the jazz group after school, and as the school year went on, students were also wanting to be in the musical, track and field, etc., so it was impossible to have a consistent group. After surveying students and parents, they moved the group to the morning. During the day today that she sent this back to me on Monday, she asked a few students that were in the jazz groups if they rode the bus and what time they would get on and so forth. She found that the difference was only about 20 to 30 minutes, and her take is that the jazz band members might be waking up only 20 to 30 minutes earlier, but then they are mentally engaged before they actually begin their first period class rather than walking around the halls. This is an issue that she's raising, and she believes that eliminating jazz band from the morning would have a severe impact on it. This would not, though, this would fall into our having severely limiting the high school and middle school activities before 8 a.m. So that's one piece we should discuss. The other one is about ending all official practices or activities, athletic or artistic, by 9 p.m. I spoke with Kathy Nickleby, the high school principal, today, and they have concerns regarding practices, many events. For example, the choir concert is at 7:30 on Monday. It had been at 8 o'clock last year, so they moved it up a half hour. I think they need to move it up even further, again, until 7 o'clock to make sure that those things don't go along. But we do have hockey practices, swing practices in the fall and spring play that oftentimes go past 9 o'clock, and they can't always guarantee completion by being back to school by 9 p.m. And so the issue that even though we put this into practice, there may be instances in which it does not happen. But we are certainly going to make that a goal. And I do want to hear from the board as to whether or not we will allow jazz band to continue at the before school time. And that's the recommendation that I'm putting forward, to table it and then to implement these things.
Motion? Oh, Stacy Stout, our sixth board member, has joined us by phone. Hello, Stacy.
Stacy?
I think she has us on mute because of the feedback
Yes.
problems. Okay, just wanted to make sure you were there.
Yeah, it's hard to hear,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and I'm putting it on mute, so if I have to respond, it takes me a second.
Okay, I knew you were on mute, is why we waited for you to respond, just to make sure you're still there. We'll
Yep.
try and speak up, and if we get too loud for our mics, tell us to scoot back. Okay. Before we discuss, we do need a motion. Someone wants to make a motion, then we can have a discussion.
So moved.
So moved, okay.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion.
Wouldn't these be, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Mike.
Wouldn't these be, I'm concerned that, I think they should be called, these should be more like guidelines maybe, and, I mean, I'm concerned that they are too proscriptive. Is that the right word? Prescriptive. I think that we should make all of these a recommendation, something we'd like to see happen, and what we can change, do change, but if there are things like the jazz band, and things that go past 9, let's just be sure that we're all aware of them, and that, we're moving in this direction. I'd rather have this be guidelines that we work with over the course of the next year.
Dr. Larson, can I ask how this is different than what we discussed on January 5th and again on July 14th? I think on both those dates, the board very clearly said these should be implemented. And so how is this different than what we've already done?
It's not different. I haven't mandated them, though, until this time.
But you enacting these with the district isn't a board piece. I mean, that's you enacting your responsibilities and working with your building. So I'm not sure what this recommendation is or does, besides table.
It does table the issue until the 1920 school year, and then it does add these things that would be mandated, that had not been mandated before.
So even though the board asked them to be implemented twice, they haven't been implemented.
Yes.
I also had a point of clarification on the testing times. So when we say 8 o'clock, try to avoid 8 o'clock finals at the high school. I'm not sure what that would mean. Would that mean 8:01 is acceptable, 8:10 is acceptable, 8:15 is acceptable, or does the board need to clarify that? I mean, maybe it should say first period. I just want to make it clear. So.
I don't know how they schedule at the high school in terms of their final exams. I believe that they block them, so I think there's 2 days of finals, probably periods 1, 3, and 5 one day, and 2, 4, and 6. Is that how it's done?
You know what? I can't remember. I don't remember how.
Yeah,
how our
so
kids do-
last year there was 3 days of finals. We had 2 finals each day, and we didn't start until about 8:30. We had like stress busters in the morning, and they brought in like therapy dogs and had different types of things to alleviate student stress before, but that's still like that's only at 8:30, pushing it back to.
So you've got information too from 2 different people within the district. How were these ideas vetted with buildings?
I shared them with the principals, and that's been it. I have not spoken with the staff members on this.
Can we each speak twice?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I like the ideas that have come forth that we continue to call the low-hanging fruit, easy ways to try to address some of these times to encourage kids to get more sleep. I also hope that when this is revisited, I hope we could have this in the meeting notes, is that perhaps we have put together a task force of parents who would be addressing transportation needs, and we would, engage the PTO more thoroughly to hear some of their concerns and really take more of the suggestions from other superintendents who have done this in the past and things that have helped them bring the community along in the conversation. So it may flow more smoothly, and the impacts on all families are more strongly considered.
Other comments, Mike?
Also, I don't see a mechanism to track things over the course of the next year. Would we want to track that and have some sort of report back over the course of time? The behavior issues or absences, I'm assuming it's already tracked. And
We have that data, yeah.
There's a way to just be sure that we're connecting that to what may or may not be sleep related.
I don't know that we would know that.
Yeah.
We don't know when the kid goes to bed.
Well, I mean, if a counselor meets with somebody and determines that the kid's not getting enough sleep, just be nice to know.
When you look at number 6 here, I was told that some of the counselors do, or when students are dealing with either counselors or behavioral issues, that they do sometimes ask about sleep-type questions, but not everyone has training, so we would have to provide training to make sure that people could be able to do that and make those kind of assessments, and we could track that after the people had the training, but we don't have that in place yet.
Kevin, did you want to speak to this?
So, my understanding of this is this will automatically come back for consideration in 19 and 20?
That's the resolution, resolution on the floor.
Okay. So, I guess, again, the questions I wrestle with are those of how we consider all the families, and will that at all change between now and then? Will there be some new, I mean, when I look at it, I mean, it's really kind of a geometry problem, and I always remember, geometry problem, you have the givens. And actually, that was my favorite maths, was the geometry. And if the givens are the same, then the problem would look the same next year as it does now. So, for an automatic seeing it come back without any, and part of our board thing is we don't revisit something unless there's a substantial, some real reason for change. So, I guess I just offer that we be very thoughtful in this, that it isn't something that's hanging over the community's head. We need to really, if we're gonna do this, we need to figure out how it could be done without negatively impacting the families in our community. So, the bus thing, when we talk about the bus thing, many of the districts that have made the change have the 3-tier busing so that they have that opportunity to have late start elementaries and early start elementaries, and the parents have choice. With the 2-tier system, we don't have that luxury. So, these are these things that I keep thinking about. How does this change? I know you offered kind of that Minneapolis hybrid thing out there, which kind of addressed maybe the high school piece, but I still think that there was then that bus thing, for the elementary. So That's the thing that's hard for me to get my arms around is unless we see somehow, we do not know how the childcare, we don't know how this change could impact this community on childcare. And that is a real issue, I think, that we haven't really figured out. The idea of us moving forward but not having that piece of information so that families can truly understand the impacts and what they might mean to them as far as their budget, as far as just finding childcare in general, all these things. I would really like, if we're going to come back and look at this again, these are all things that I'd like to really do good work on. I'd like to also, hopefully there'll be some more studies authored for the sleep times for elementary school students, of which now we have very few. It would be nice to know we have all the evidence on the upper grades, but we don't have it on the elementaries. I'd like to know if we can. I mean, that would be something that would be great if we could tell Julie and Carla and Jace and all the folks, can you get us more of this information? Because I think that's really lacking. But, I mean, to close, I think that whether it's this year or next year, if the givens don't change, I think it's a hard course for us.
I support what Kevin's saying. I don't think the givens are going to change. We're not going to, in fact, looking forward, we have some really awful financial decisions to make. We are not going to have money in 2 years for more buses. We have some awful, awful challenges, and I don't think it ought to automatically come back, truth be told. If more information comes before the board and we want to reconsider it, the existing board at that time can say, well, why don't we relook at this? But I would be in favor of just ending it right now and let it come back when we have better information because of all the things that you said. I don't think the givens are going to change. The impact on families, if we can't do something substantial about busing, are not going to change. The little kids cannot be on that bus at 6:30 in the morning. They cannot be getting home really late, so they have to sleep 12 hours from 6 to what? And have no family time. I mean, the givens are not going to change. I mean, I think we have just spent an absolute boatload of time on this issue, that what we have is working as well as it can right now. And we have other things to deal with. We just have some really terrible problems coming forward for us, for the board to address. And I'd be happy to table it, but then not bring it up until something new shows up. I don't want to bring it back automatically just to talk about it again. We don't have anything new.
Stacy, I know you're on the phone still. Do you have any comments you want to add? I can't see if you're raising your hand.
Stacy, do you have something you want to add to it?
I don't have anything. I just want to make sure I hear clearly
The discussion?
when we go to vote, because I'm wondering if Judy was just saying she wants the vote to be on a different motion. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, if it were up to me, I'd probably just vote no. But I'm willing to
Vote no to table it or vote no to?
You could amend it.
We could
or
amend it.
Yes,
and just say-
amend it. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I follow it before we vote. That I
Voting to table it.
Right. I'm going to let my fellow board members know that I'm in favor of rejecting the resolution for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think we should have to micromanage our superintendent and ask him to do these specific steps in a resolution. We've asked for them twice. They should have happened by now. I'm not sure why they haven't. We just keep being told they haven't happened. If we move this resolution forward, we are now micromanaging the superintendent, and then the expectation becomes, if we want anything done, that we would have to have a resolution, and that very much concerns me. The other part is we have good information about our adolescents. We don't have any information or limited information on elementary, but I think things have been proposed and discussed that address that. This idea of the online courses. Ms. Nookeby contacted me directly after the last board meeting. The high school is working on this. And I thank Lynn for reaching out to Kathy and sharing that, and then we had a great conversation. I think we need to continue to look at those innovative solutions, because you're right, we've got many parts that we have not figured out, but we have pathways, alternative pathways to address our adolescents, and they would have choice, which I think is important. So I would advocate that my fellow board members vote against this resolution and Will we make a different resolution? Any more discussion? Kevin?
I would say, not to, I think that what has happened here has been good. The board has thought of this, worked with the community, heard the community input, listened, very importantly, to students and the input of students. So I feel with hearing all the data from the Sleep Society, doing some of my own work on the internet to try to unweave some of this, this is not done, it's not wasted activity. I mean, because we understand this now more. So before the process, if someone said, well, do you support or, you know, I wouldn't know because we hadn't studied it. So I really do think that this was a good exercise that we're ultimately finding doesn't quite work for us now. So, I mean, I'm glad we did this.
What doesn't quite work for us right now, the
Well,
resolution or the?
No, the whole thing and changing the start time. I, too, am with you on the resolution piece, that I would propose, and kind of to Judy's point, that we vote our conscience here on this one, and then we'll look at another one, should that come up.
Dr. Larson, can you explain to us also, up until last week, I assume, what you were proposing was different? The recommendation that you shared with the PTO, you've been sharing with the community, is that you were going to recommend to the board a flip of start times. And so within a week's time, that seems to have changed. And what has caused that sudden change? Because new information has come forward from December 7th to tonight. And so I'm confused of why the resolution changed so dramatically in a week's time.
It was very clear to me on December 7th that at least 3 board members were going to vote against the resolution, and based on what they had said during the conversation, and that means that it would not pass. And so if a resolution does not pass, it needs at least 4 votes to pass. I didn't want the board to be split. I thought that a tabling of the motion would be, a tabling of the decision would make sense. That would give us some time to either think about other things or do some other research. But I didn't want to see the board split on this, and I didn't want to make another recommendation that was going to be rejected.
Any other discussion? Mike?
When is the bus contract up? So when it comes up for, what is it, renewal, probably a few months or what, I don't know when it comes up for renewal, but do you send out an RFP to all different companies again?
Yes.
Okay, well, just maybe at that time also, we could look at different tiered systems, you know, as part of the proposal. You know, maybe you get the same price for 3-tier system at some point.
Any other comments? We ready? Stacy, last chance for comments?
Stacy, can you hear us?
Can I just need to clarify, is the motion,
The motion hasn't changed, so the motion on the table is the recommendation in the packet from Dr. Larson that asks us to, I moved my resolutions. To table it, and includes the second piece about the action, in the interim period, the 7 things that were mentioned. So the resolution
So it has-
includes both. Sorry. Go ahead.
has a motion been made and seconded
Yes.
to table it?
But the motion on the floor is the recommendation in the packet that says the school board table the issue to 2019-20 with the consideration of school start times will be reexamined, and then in the interim period are the 7 things that we've discussed twice now listed there. So the
Okay.
motion is a full motion right now. Do you wish to amend the motion or have other comment towards this motion?
No, I'm ready to vote.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. Motion fails. I would like to make a new motion. I would like to move that we support the high school and middle school in continuing to examine innovative ways to address school sleep and start time for our students, and share that information with families as it becomes available, with a report back to the board in 1 year. At that point, we can then continue the conversation based upon the things they've researched as buildings, as options they could do within their buildings, within their structure, so there's good staff input. And then the board can continue the conversation at that point in time. That's my motion. Does anyone have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Is that for the middle school and high school?
The reason-
Innovative ways in the middle school and high school, is that how I read that?
That's what I phrased, because the research we have on sleep is adolescent sleep. And through the work that the middle school and high school does, it might be that the high school has some options, the middle school might have different options, or might not have options based upon age of students. Because the thing we talked about last time was the online option for our high school students. That's not an option that works as well at middle school, I don't believe, and Dr. Newbeck would have to, he's shaking his head at me a little bit, for many other reasons, but they might have something else that they try. They might try a more of a lunch and learn type thing first thing in the morning. They might try other innovative ways of addressing the concern about start time. I mean, if the adolescent brain isn't ready to address academics at 8 o'clock, is there something that happens between 8 and 8:30 in terms of physical movement, in terms of, is that when advisory happens and doing some other types of work? I mean, I don't know. I think our teachers and our administrators are very smart, and they know the givens within their buildings, within their developmental ages of their students, and I think we should leave this to the experts in the field to address. We have found through our study that there are very contextualized issues within our community. They have great access to parents in terms of getting feedback, and that when the buildings have things that work, they could bring them forward, but it would be nice to have a report in a year to kind of know where we are, to relook at any research that's come out since then. But based on my conversation with Ms. Nickleby, she is doing an excellent job in offering the online solutions we talked about last time to students. They will be included in the registration booklets coming out in January, and those were off to the printer before we had our conversation. So I think our building administrators and our teachers are aware and responsive, and it might be they find the solution that we're looking for. And we've been asking since maybe September, October for innovative ideas, and they have not come forward. So I think if we very deliberately turn this to the experts is our best way forward, because I don't want to look at a body of research and just say, oh, we're not going to do anything about that. We know our students need more sleep, but we know there are challenges in implementing just a simple flip. And I think we discussed that last time.
So to be clear, what you're saying is that in a year's, this resolution in a year's time would direct administration to come forward with some alternative and innovative possible solutions for giving our adolescents more sleep.
Right. Some of the ideas they might have the opportunity to try out on, depending on what they are. I mean, some of them would still involve existing bus structure. When I received a letter from one of our community members who's in the audience, one suggestion is to utilize our buses differently. That if we have students in online courses and they're not attending first hour, and Ms. Nickleby thought of this as well, independent thought here on two parties, said, well, why couldn't they arrive on the elementary bus? Our parents have said they need these students to be nannies to their children, so having these students on the bus with their children would be a very good thing. So I think we've got lots of good people thinking about this, but they need time to truly address it. I think we've got good resources in our community. I think the Sleep Society would be willing to work with us and talk with us. I think Dr. Larson's involved with a number of groups looking at innovation in schools. And I think the best innovation you get is you have to have a problem to solve. We have a problem we want to solve. We know our adolescents, based on research, are not getting the sleep they need. One solution was proposed that had many difficulties. There's more than one solution. And I'm fine if the report comes back in a year that says we couldn't find anything. But the fact is we have to try. Right?
I'd like to have a report come back in a year that said this is what we've been doing works, instead of we couldn't come up with anything.
I don't think you can guarantee innovation. I mean, it would be, I think the report would have to say, we tried these things, these worked, these didn't. So yes, I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, basically.
So you're amending the motion to
I
say,
don't want you to think about it and then come back. We've been thinking all year about this.
right.
Okay,
Here's
I
some
want you to
things.
try
we-
something between now and a year and see what works and what doesn't work.
Try is a pretty strong word. Is it that we want researched? I mean, because it might be they research 2 or 3 ideas and they don't have, I mean, a year is a short window too.
Trying is the same as innovating, isn't it?
I don't think so.
It can be.
It can be, but does the timeline allow for trying, or does the
Well,
timeline
for
allow for
instance,
research?
You could say no homework after school. That would help us sleep. Try that, see how it goes. I mean, that's that's innovative, that's trying, and if it didn't work out,
Like, I think that there was, in the report, there was notable, the secretions thing, of melatonin secretions of when they start flowing and when they recede. So that would go,
okay.
right, I
well,
mean, that wouldn't
or
quite
to
go
the
with
wellness
science.
piece, whatever, I'd like to have seen something attempted, or,
What I'm fearful of is that to truly try something out, you need more than a year. You need some time to research the idea, you need some time to maybe pilot test an idea, and so a pilot could be a trial, but something, if you're gonna make a change, you might need more time than a year. And so I think to mandate a trial terrifies me. I mean, honestly, in terms of being respectful to our teachers. So I think it can be strengthened, like you're saying, that the report should include, things that were investigated. And so it's not an easy look of, oh yeah, we looked and we couldn't find anything. It does then require administration to research at least a couple other innovative options beyond just an idea of flipping or shifting, because that's what was proposed, that was a struggle with the community. And so the online piece that's already being implemented, I'm not an expert in middle school learners, but I know our teachers are. They do a lot of summer trainings and things to keep themselves current. They're going to have better ideas. It might impact how they spend their staff development this summer, next fall. But I'm fearful of the word try.
I don't know what I'd expect out of any kind of a report then in a year. I don't see the point. I think that, because we encourage innovation. Remember before, we said we want you to be outside the box. We encourage failure. Try something different. That's where we should be at, in my opinion.
And we have been since September, and we haven't gotten anything. So by asking for the report, I think puts more accountability into it by saying, you have to tell us what you thought about, at least. Right now, we've asked for it, we don't even know what's been considered.
I have objection to year.
Okay.
Only because our year is going to be filled with some really tremendous time-consuming, we need to help the community and our teachers. If we put on this other big piece, I don't want to talk about sleep in a year. I want to talk about enrollment, and I want to talk about our finances, and I want to talk about, are we going to be able to fund the programs that we have? Are we going to be able to replace any of the programs that we're going to cut?
I'd rather spend time talking about that. And then as things perk back through about sleep, we can address it. But I just feel like we have a huge amount of trouble with this, and I'd rather have reports on that. This is a hard year. And I don't think we should add more to our administration and our teachers.
Are you making a motion to amend, are you making a motion to amend the motion? Or are you speaking
Restate the
against it?
motion.
The way I originally stated, I'm agreeing with you, so I'm hoping you're amending, is that a year from now, they would come back with a report, and we go ahead and implement some different things. Dr. Larson, did you write the motion down, I hope?
I tried to.
Okay.
The first part was support the high school and middle school with innovative ways to improve students' sleep, and report back in 1 year. This would be exclusive of start time changes. And then I wrote down again a little bit later on, I thought it was support administration to create or discover innovative ways to improve students' sleep, report back to the school board on efforts and successes, failures, including pilots, trials, and then we didn't want to have trials, and so I'm a little foggy as to exactly where we're landing.
So I said 1 year, and I'm agreeing with Judy, 1 year might be too soon.
It's too soon.
Especially with Mike's comments, and so if we want to amend the motion and make it 18 months, so it's something we can examine a year from summer, If we think teachers need more time than that, to ask Dr. Larson to come back next board meeting with the timeline after discussing with the administration. But I don't want to.
Amend the motion to 18 months.
18 months? I think that's a, thank you. All those in favor, other discussion of the amendment to the motion to change it from 1 year to 18 months?
Stacy, do you have anything?
I don't, thank you.
All those in favor of the motion to amend the motion to 18 months, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The motion on the table is now amended to an 18 months reporting back to the board on innovative ideas considered, possibly tried, to keep the conversation moving forward. Is that what I'm sorry. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion?
May I get a clarification, please?
Yes.
Did I have it right the first time, that the motion is to support the high school and middle school with innovative ways to improve student sleep?
Right.
Report back in 18 months.
Right. So.
On efforts, and just that?
Right.
August of 2019.
I was thinking the 18 months would take us to the board retreat of summer of 19. Because then the board would have an opportunity at the retreat to revisit and think next steps at the retreat.
Decide whether you want to take next steps.
Right, exactly. But I think this keeps the conversation moving, allows us to act upon research that we've read. I have a really hard time ignoring the research. But it takes in consideration the community, but I think most importantly, takes in the expertise of our teachers and our administrators who know the limitations we have. And I appreciate the band teacher coming back with information. I appreciate Ms. Nickleby reaching out to me. I thank Lynn for reaching out to her. I think there's good conversation that can come from our buildings. So, Kevin?
And it's, we're working on that ZIP innovation where we're asking for teachers and staff and everybody that has an ISB 832.net email address, everybody that has that, to bring forward ideas that can positively impact our schools. And so this might be something that we would open that up again. There'll be more work in that arena just because we know that that's something that's working.
Right. Julie?
Just one more comment that, I think as a board, we are just continually tasked with making sure we have our pulse on student wellness, and this is part of that task.
Stacy, last comments?
I don't have anything to add. I do agree that this is an issue that we want to keep looking for possibilities, and so I support the motion.
All those in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for all your hard work, Dr. Larson, administrators. This has been, and community members for your input. It's been very helpful and supportive. Thank you so much. Stacy, thank you for joining us on the phone. Are you going to stay with us, or are you going to jump on the plane now?
No, I'm about to get on a plane, but thank you for accommodating me.
Safe travels.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Okay. Next action item. Approval, MSBA Special Education Resolution. Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chair, as a member of the board, there are two resolutions here before you. They're about special education, largely referred to as the cross-subsidy. What the cross-subsidy is that that's money that is taken from the general fund, and it is used to subsidize special education funding because the state and federal government have not funded it at the level that they said that they would when the laws were passed. There are many whereases in this resolution. You've had a chance to read it, but I want to draw your attention to this one. Whereas the cross-subsidy for school districts for fiscal year 2016 is $679 million, and that's a 5.6% increase from fiscal year 2015, and that there was no comparable increase from the state and/or federal government to do that. Therefore, be it resolved that we urge the governor and legislature to strenuously advocate for significant increases in federal special education funding and meaningful special education reforms at the federal and state levels. And now, therefore, be it resolved that there is an urgency for the Minnesota legislature to convene a task force to work on special education funding, specifically with a focus on the impacts of the new special education funding formulas, the projected cross-subsidy, and recommendations for the timeline to eliminate the cross-subsidy. That's the key piece for the state recommendation, and for the federal one, it is the same, except that we are urging the president and legislature to strenuously advocate for significant increases in federal special education funding and meaningful special education reforms at the federal and state levels, and that the state of Minnesota calls upon the Congress of the United States to pass appropriate legislation in order to increase funding for federal special education mandates to meet the urgent financial special education needs of our cities and towns. And so the recommendation is to approve this as MSBA has suggested. There,
Second.
Any discussion?
This is something that is long overdue, it's been out there since 1975. Yep. And, although it's taken a long time, we really do need to
so for clarification, Madam Chair, the first resolution, Member Donovan introduced the following resolution about the state of Minnesota, and then the same thing for Member Donovan introduced the following resolution, move its adoption to federal, fully fund special education services federal.
And my comment was federal,
Okay.
the IDEA unfunded.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board member, or committee reports. AMSD?
Oh, gosh, so it comes too fast. Okay. Let's see,
Madam Chair, Mike, I prepared some comments about it from the Reimagine session, unless you want to speak to it, because you were also there with Julie and Kevin.
no, go ahead.
What?
That's good. I was just gonna say.
Were they part of your comments
My whole comment was about Reimagine Minnesota.
for your report?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and I was just gonna say, we had a meeting on the 1st of December, that was like before this meeting, and I never reported on it, and it really isn't it wasn't much of a big deal, but there we had a couple of new representatives sit in and have a conversation with, you know, with the board, and a lot of people asked a lot of questions about, you know, about what was it like for them to get elected, what they have to go through, and what's it like dealing with, you know, the different people, the different ideas in the Senate. And I got some pretty, in legislature, I mean, so I got some pretty cool things that I'm gonna be trying to do more. Just like, because I said, you gotta get really tough skin, really thick skin if you're gonna go door to door to get people to, you know, to vote for you. And, you know, what do you do when someone says something like they hate you, or, you know, your politics or something? And that doesn't happen that much, but, you know, they both talked about they're both solutions. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. But they talked about, you know, we're closer than we think on issues. We just have different ideas on how to get there, and we always need to start with a common starting point. And to me, that says a lot. And I think that when I move forward with conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with, as, you know, ideologically or whatever, let's start from a point that we both, you know, agree on, and just have that presence of mind to go there, and then rationally just discuss our, you know, the points. And I was just really kind of, I got a good feeling about, you know, how people actually interact as opposed to what you hear in the news all the time. And so I just wanted to just share that with the crowd.
Minnesota High School League.
Yeah, I got a report from our guy from Ray. I put it in the system here. I can read it if you'd like, though.
Send it to the rest of the
Hmm?
time. You want to read it?
Well, some questions about, you know, drones, and I guess the most important thing, well, not important, but I think that they hired a new director for the Minnesota High School League, and his name is Eric Martins. There were questions about drones. They're not allowed in state tournaments. The MSHSL encourages members to develop their own policies. We do not allow drones during play. We've allowed them during halftime at football games to record the dance team. There was a drones question. The media broadcast contract is with Channel 45, KSTC TV, and it's been extended to 2021, and many state tournaments are available live and free of charge on Channel 45 for football, hockey, basketball, and additional tournaments are available through webcasting. Then Student Transfer Ad Hoc Committee, there's a recommendation of an additional exception to bylaw 111, which is the transfer rule. School administration review, AD and the principal from the sending school and the AD and principal from receiving school agree that varsity eligibility should be considered for student in question. That's my report.
So last time when I brought those items up, they weren't questions, they were things that were being discussed by the high school league this year. So there'll be continuing conversations, I believe, on these items from the high school league during the year, so it's good to have the background. Thank you. Yeah, Kevin?
On the drone piece, do we have drone insurance? Bill, do you know this? Put you on the spot, but I am, sit on the MISBATE Insurance Trust for Minnesota, and drone insurance is something that they are strongly suggesting school districts, if they're going to have drones, that we have drone insurance. So, you know, I would look into that, because a wayward drone could be a problem, and we do use them, so.
Also, I know that Mark's going to briefly talk about Reimagine, but I believe we might have all received a copy of this in our inboxes, and this is sort of a review of that, with Julie and Mark and I, and oh yeah, and Kevin was there and his hair grew that time. Also, did you get this attachment? Well, yeah. Carlos.
That I was Carlos Mariani, a representative.
I walked away and I came back, and where Kevin was sitting, there was some guy with all this hair. And I said, that's not Kevin. I'm not sure if you got this, the second annual School Board Members of Color meeting that may have been on an attachment. These people met, this group met last year, and they're encouraging all board members to come, and there's the invite here in RSVP. It's going to be held on January 10th from 4 to 6 at the Hilton in Minneapolis. So superintendents and board members, please share this, save the date broadly with your entire board. All are invited, so just so you know that it's out there for you.
Julie, MSBA Delegate Assembly.
We had the delegate assembly in St. Louis Park on December 1st and 2nd. December 1st, we had a very interesting speaker from the FBI who came and spoke to us about cybersecurity. It was very sobering. I grabbed lots of information and shared it with Patrick, some opportunities for free training for people to come in and talk to our kids about how to be more responsible on electronic devices. It was terrifying, the information that was shared. Our school board introduced 4 of, I believe there were 19 resolutions. 21. And 3 of our resolutions passed overwhelmingly. We presented one about aligning ESSA and World's Best Workforce assessments. That passed overwhelmingly. We also introduced a resolution to ask to change a 1950 state statute requiring only 50 signatures to call for consolidation of school districts. We asked for a percentage of voters. We asked for, I believe, a percentage of 25% of voters. And then we also passed our third resolution. Why is it escaping my brain right now? The third one was about, yes, the overwhelming number of data requests. We're trying to ask for some reimbursement. So it was a successful day.
MSBA Association Legislative Liaison, Kevin?
Well, most of what I was going to do was in the delegate assembly, but the convention is on the 10th, 11th, and 12th, primarily the 11th and 12th. So all are encouraged to register. We are the only state association that has the winter conference as a free piece of membership. The only thing that costs is that luncheon, which is optional. So I encourage you to take advantage and find value in our membership by coming and attending. And neat thing is we've got, Mahtomedi has got a number of proposals, workshops that we're going to do. Looks like about 5 of them. Judy with Wildwood, the social emotional skills and the toolbox connecting to the responsive classroom. Stacy's going to do the mathematical mindset with O.H. Anderson. Mike, you're going to do technology in the elementary specialist classes. Lucy, you're going to do the many uses of technology at Mahtomedi Middle School, Chromebooks to Fab Lab. And I have the honor of presenting with Kathy Nickleby and Jim Lane on Pogles. And I have learned all about Pogles, and it's fun. So, Mahtomedi is well represented at this conference. We're well represented in the resolutions that we put forward, and this board has, with all the different things that our people are doing, we really are doing good work for Mahtomedi schools and the state as a whole. So that's my report on that.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update on MAIF. The last board meeting for MAIF was on November 13th, and I just wanted to make people aware that teacher grants, the application window is November 1st through January 23rd, so that's going on right now. And the scholarship applications for students went live December 15th. So, yes, we'll go live tomorrow. Sorry. It's not December 15th. It feels like the 30th, so. We also had a discussion about the tree lighting ceremony, and that's about the update. They're also looking for Hill Award nominations. Do you remember what the deadline for that is?
End of February.
Okay, end of February. So.
Kevin, BEA.
Yes. In your packet is we've had our first fall meeting, and then the packet kind of goes through what we as participants saw and did and participated in, but it's been maybe a while since we've really had much discussion on it, but the idea is Mahtomedi receives integration money, and our charge is to do work with another district that has a higher percentage of students of color, in this case North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale. And so we're doing collaborative work between Mahtomedi schools and North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale. And so this report kind of goes through achievement integration goals, intended outcomes for the advisory, just everything you would want to know about the work we're doing. And it's some very exciting work. And the separate piece that I gave you was a spreadsheet of the differences between the schools in North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale, and Mahtomedi. And they're 5 to 6 miles. The schools are 5 to 6 miles away from our schools, and you can see the differences on the left and the right. And we certainly have work to do to have an equitable and excellent education for all our students. So if you have any questions, I stand for them.
Judy, 916? Any other subcommittee reports or items? Superintendent's report, Dr. Larson?
Thank you. Madam Chairman of the Board, just very briefly, we had our leadership cohort meeting. Lynn Beaker, Bill Manazzi, Patrick Crothers, Dr. Mike Newbeck, and Beth Steeman. are all part of that, and the focus is on personalized learning, innovation, and leadership capacity. One of the things that we spent a lot of time on was the ABCs for students and staff, and those ABCs are autonomy, belonging, and competence. And if we can have those in each classroom, with each student and with each staff member feeling that they have some autonomy, that they feel as if they're belonging, they will develop some competence and skills. And so that's one of the things that we spent time on. Additionally, we had a Chamber of Commerce, Business and Educators meeting. Stacy and Kevin are also part of that group. That's Matamidi, White Bear Lake, and Century College. The goal is to develop opportunities for students to explore careers in the geographical area. And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the AMSD Reimagined Minnesota. Kevin was also there with me, along with Julie and Mike, and so if there's other things to include, please let me know and we can chime in. But very briefly, and this is kind of at a glance, the purpose of this program is that we have had the superintendents from the metropolitan school districts, 47 school districts in all, meet many times. There have been World Cafes in which we've had community members, teachers, other folks involved, and students, and we've tried to figure out what exactly we can do to work best to close the achievement gap and provide equity for all students. And we came up with 3 goals. The first one is CME, effective diverse stakeholders who use trusting relationships to create welcoming classrooms, schools, and communities that meet the needs and hopes and dreams of all students and families. The CME is the first one. See all, and then see me, and then see all, and then serve all. Personalized, relevant education for all students that guarantees access to rigorous learning and eliminating predictability based on race. And then we want to support all. That's equitable resources, time, talent, and funds aligned to student needs and their hopes and dreams that enable every district to see all and serve all the students. There are 9 strategies involved in all of this. The Matamidi group worked on teacher and teaching, and that was develop, sustain, and evaluate cultural competence for teachers. That was our area. There's 4 others in the areas of teachers and teaching. Student and family support is the next area, and then systems and leadership. And those are the 3 areas that we worked on and that we looked at, and we went over the plan. Is there anything that we'd like to add to that? There's not much detail.
I will say the students that they had there is 4, well, they had 4 that were on the panel, but they had a number of other students there. Absolutely blew me away. I mean, if ever there is a worry that our kids aren't going to be able to take the baton pass to them, actually they will be the ones that do better than us by far. I was so impressed with the caliber and what they had to say. It was so insightful. And for students that were 17 and 18, I think there's actually a sophomore there too, from Hopkins maybe, and it was just, that was really the high point, I thought, of this whole thing, was hearing the students speak.
I would agree. I actually wrote down a couple of the quotes from them. I am more than the color of my skin or the language that I speak. And then also, I don't see myself in those classes competing with those kids. I mean, it was really powerful, some of the things that they had to share with us, so.
And then I had just one other thing to add. Today is a sad day in a lot of ways. It's the 5th year anniversary of the Sandy Hook killing. It's one thing that we take very seriously, is the safety of all of our students and staff, and it's a reminder that we have to be ever vigilant and careful and make sure that we are creating welcoming environments where students feel safe, where staff feel safe, and where people feel welcome. On this 5th year anniversary, it's something that's a charge that we hold sacred, that we do every day in schools to make sure that students are safe, and we do have protections in place because we want to make sure all students, a safe student is the one who can learn and succeed. And on this anniversary, it's a time to rededicate ourselves to making sure that happens.
Motion to adjourn? Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So,